I'm Brittany. This is Chuaning, and welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch and read gay things. We are finishing Volume 9 of Erha today. I think I may have accidentally not read a chapter that I was supposed to have read, because I think we were supposed to stop at 292, but instead we stopped at 291. So I think we actually have a little bit extra to read today. So we typically read for 2 hours and take a break somewhere around halfway. I almost said halfway through the middle. That is not a thing that makes sense. We take a break around halfway through. We might run a little bit long today since we have an extra chapter to read, but it's the last reading stream of the year and we're finishing a volume. So we're finishing the volume. I don't care if I have to be here until 6 o'clock. We're finishing the volume and we're going to see Chuaning. We are manifesting this. I brought him. He's here. And he is going to be here on the page. So help me God. There are trigger warnings down in the description box. Ooh, I need to speak clearly today. It's a good thing I'm not about to read for 2 hours. There's also a link down in the description, oh no, that leads to the evergreen Discord for Gaywatch if you want to have more bookish chats about queer things and danmei and Erha and all sorts of things. That is always available to you. And we are on page 297 for chapter 291, which is called Two Worlds Finally Entwined. And because I never say this enough, I have not read this series. I have no idea what's coming next, but I have histrionics accordingly. So I hope you weren't expecting an audiobook situation. Liv has given some memberships to people. Liv has sent 5 Gaywatch gift memberships to people. Liv, this is not the first time that you have done this, Liv. You are exceedingly generous, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. We also, as a channel, surpassed 15,000 subscribers yesterday, I believe, thanks to the Gay Hockey Show. And I am utterly exhausted and overworked. Otherwise, I would be celebrating like right now. But I can't quite yet. I'll have to look for an opportunity in the new year to do that. It will probably be a live stream of some sort where, I don't know, maybe we just chat about heated rivalry or something. I don't know, something. Because 15,000 is the next major milestone that I and we have been working towards. Like, the next major milestone in terms of YouTubers is 25K, which I can't think about, or I'm just gonna start crying. So I wish I had the energy to celebrate now, but we will be doing something in the new year because 15K is utterly fucking ridiculous for a show that watches and reads gay things. So chapter 291 is called Two Worlds Finally Entwined. I'm sick. I'm ill and I don't have any lemonade. So we're going to write out the rest of this volume with water. Taeshunjin stood in midair, his robes roiling at his back like black ink. He narrowed his eyes, his broad sleeves, thickly embroidered with ceremonial patterns, buffeted by the wind. The spiritual energy in his palm thrashed like a dragon attempting to devour the sun, tearing into visible fog and intangible time. With a deafening crack, a bolt of lightning split the sky like the fall of an axe. Oh. Fuck you and your description. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then the waters of Heavenly Lake surged backward and the snows of Kunlun flurried in rage. The clouds charged across the sky, crowding out the sun and moving against the winds. When Chuaning had come to this world, He'd torn open only a tiny crack. Later on, Shimei had used all he had to pry open that crack and follow him to this world. Both of those fissures in space and time had been minor injuries, swiftly repaired by the power of primordial chaos. Even Shu Shuanglin's heavenly rift on Mount Jiao, torn open with the power of those 5 holy weapons, was only a temporary rip through the walls separating the 2 worlds. The difference between them and the tear Mo Run created this time was night and day. Crimson engulfed the sky. 2 suns and 2 moons rose in the heavens, glowing corpse-pale and dim as they hung overhead. We might be in trouble. From mild Jiangnan to snowy Mobei, from the far corners of the oceans to the ends of the earth, people stopped what they were doing and looked up at this terrifying sight. In Wuchang town, a lisping child sobbed in his mother's embrace. The mother kissed his cheeks and murmured, it's okay, darling, be good. Mom's here, Mom's right here." In Yangzhou City, an old woman stumbled with her cane in hand, stooping low as she rasped, How are there 2 moons and 2 suns? Good heavens, what's going on?" On Flying Flower Isle, Third Lady Sun frowned, standing on the shoreline with her arms crossed before her chest. She sharply commanded everyone to return to their houses and put out their lights, then had her servants bring all the homeless, elderly, weak, and infirm to the manor for safety. She stared into the eerie skies, her eyes glinting with sparks. The great sects of Guyue, Huohuang Pavilion, and Wubei Temple looked up as well. It no longer mattered if they wished to believe it. The space-time gate of life and death had indeed been opened. Mo Run hovered in midair, eyes red with bloodlust and shining with fervor and madness. Xu Mingjing had hypnotized and enchanted him over and over. He'd come back to life only to die again and return once more. His memories had been crushed to incoherency, his body puppeteered by a single cognizant soul. There was no sanity left in him, his mind even more volatile than before. He was destruction incarnate. Soon, half the world was shrouded in thick black clouds. Tishanjun tipped his face to the sky and burst into laughter. But what was he laughing about? He didn't know. He didn't understand. His mind was a wasteland, and all that echoed in his heart were his master's orders. He narrowed his eyes, watching the gleaming barrier beneath the storm clouds. A sneer pulled at his mouth. He reached out, voice low. "Bugui." Bugui appeared. Tishanjun ran his hand down its length, the blade glowing bright in the wake of his touch. He raised it high and brought it crashing down on the barrier between worlds. All was silence. Then a rumble shuddered through the earth. Everything fell apart. At long last, he'd opened the space-time gate of life and death, opened it, broken it, and destroyed it. Darkness descended. Tishanjun's ferocious spiritual energy and the power of the holy weapon Bugui combined to ensure the rift was torn wide open, impossible to close for 100 years. You know, at this rate, I don't know how there's going to be a volume 10. You know what I'm saying? I'm not sure what we do. I don't really know how we get out of this one. Chuaning or no, which I guess is fitting because it's the end of the series. So, just classic escalation dictates that this be the biggest, most disastrous thing to happen, which is saying something. But I'm still nervous, to put it mildly. He'd completed the mission. Tishanjun stood in the screaming gale by the heavenly rift and turned to look back at this world. He paused, then turned and strode across the rift, into the realm to which he truly belonged. When the wind stopped wailing in his ears, he opened his eyes. Before him lay a pale blankness. He'd returned to the world over which he'd declared himself emperor, to the Kunlun Tashway palace of the past life. Your Majesty? His Majesty has returned. All hail His Majesty. He stood in the middle of an overgrown plain shrouded in snow. His retinue was rushing toward him, falling to their knees in twos and threes like waves breaking over the shore. They bent their heads and kowtowed before him. Tishanjin said nothing. His predatory eyes raked over the rows of cultivators wrapped in black cloaks. He couldn't see their end. The crowd stretched to the foot of the mountain. At their head was a doddering old man. The wind scattered his grizzled hair. Lu Gong, who'd served him for so long. The year Tishanjin died, he'd first sent Lu Gong and the other palace attendants back home. He'd thought everything had come to an end. He hadn't expected a Grand Master of Medicine named Hua Binan to appear out of nowhere and bare his fangs as he made a corpse puppet of Tishanjin's body. But this revenant still had some emotion and lucidity. He was dissatisfied with the mute servants Hua Binan sent to wait on him, and only settled down once Hua Binan brought back those who'd served him in life. Then, for reasons old Lu wasn't privy to, Hua Binan disappeared from the world, leaving only the revived emperor stuck among the living no matter how badly he wished to die. As time passed, even the stupidest observer could see that the emperor had always been a puppet dancing on someone else's strings. Old Lu was no exception. But what could a wrinkled old man with one foot in the grave do? He had no kin left, and all his friends were dead and gone. He could only take serving Emperor Tishanjin to be his final mission, handling the emperor's daily needs slowly and clumsily in his dotage. Thus Lu Gong's eyes shone with joy and sadness alike when he saw him again now, his expression the most genuine among the crowd. Tishanjin's lips parted. Old Lu. Your Majesty. Lu Gong knelt and kowtowed. Your Majesty, you finally returned. You'll never guess what happened. Though he didn't realize it, he sounded like a little boy excitedly sharing good news with his guardian. This venerable one saw him again. Lu Gong blinked. Chuzongsha. I saw him lots. This venerable one's core is repaired now, too, and once everything's over, this venerable one can... Perhaps Tishanjin saw his own overexcited image reflected in the old man's rheumy eyes. He fell silent and looked uncertainly at those kneeling around him. Thank goodness. No one dared to mock him. He pressed his lips together, reshaping himself back into someone ominous and powerful. That's all the crack I needed to see, thank you. I just needed a tiny crack in the glass. That's all I needed. That's all I wanted. With a toss of his sleeves, he said, Enough. Get up, all of you. Return to Wushan Palace with this venerable one. They mounted their swords and flew back to Sichuan. The land that passed beneath their feet was abandoned earth, barren of anyone or anything. There weren't many living people left in this world. Tishanjin had long grown used to the state of things here. But after spending time in the other world and all its noisy bustle, returning to this hell on earth did feel strangely lonely. Anyone else reminded of Pride Rock under Scar's rulership? You know, when Scar was king, this is really what it's giving. That's a compliment, by the way. Literally anytime I compare anything to The Lion King, that is a high compliment from me. But we don't have time to talk about that. That night, he opened a jar of aged pear blossom white and drank it alone in the empty Wushan Palace. Since receiving Mo Zongshou's spiritual core, he'd recovered quite a bit. He could do almost everything a living person could, such as drink wine or eat food. But a corpse was a corpse, no matter how enhanced. The taste on his tongue was scarcely a third as vibrant as it had been in life. But still, he was satisfied with his lot. After a few rounds, he felt the wine go to his head. He lay on the daybed with a hand to his forehead in utter boredom, recalling past events. But they were unhappy memories, and made a poor accompaniment to the wine, only soaking him in sadness. It's volume 9, and we know she does this on purpose, and yet every time she does something on purpose, like, I don't know, use a phrase like, oh, but they were unhappy memories, and that's like the only thing that he can recall. I need to fight her. Like, I just want to fight, honestly. I just need to, like, meet her in a back alley somewhere and just fight. Fist fight. I'm very intimidating. She should be scared. He'd been avoiding these memories for years, but he feared them no longer. The two worlds were connected. All the suffering of his past would soon be erased. He narrowed his eyes, tangling his slender fingers in the tassel of the wine jug. Chuaning, he mumbled. He rose and let his feet carry him toward the long, sealed red lotus pavilion. At the door, he bumped into Lu Gong, who was just leaving. Both were surprised by each other's presence. Greetings, Your Majesty. What are you doing here? Asked Taishanjin, his eyes fixed on the basket in Lu Gong's hand, which held a feather duster and cleaning cloths, among other things. Cleaning up? Lu Gong sighed. Yes, I didn't know when Your Majesty would want to return and feared some things would rot or break if left too long. I've been coming every day to keep things tidy. Old Lu paused. Everything inside is just as it was. Please enter, Your Majesty. Taishanjun was suddenly at a loss for words. He strode to a bridge over the lotus pool, which bloomed year-round thanks to its infusion of spiritual energy. Frogs croaked endlessly from the depths of the blossoms with no care for the season. He cocked his head and listened for a while, remembering a bygone afternoon upon this same bridge. It'd been a hot summer day, the kind of sultry heat that made one long to lie still. On a whim, he'd grabbed Chuaning and kissed him on the forehead. At the time, there was little warmth between them beyond sex. This kiss out of nowhere held no trace of suggestive desire, and so Chuaning was rather startled. The cicadas in the trees cried, and the frogs in the pool croaked their incessant chorus. Taishanjin stared into those slightly widened phoenix eyes, engrossed, and said, Since there's nothing else to do, why don't we play a game? Before he could say no, Taishanjun put a finger to Chuaning's lips. Shh, let this venerable one finish. Chuaning stayed silent. Let's make a bet. This venerable one will count to 10. If one of the frogs in the courtyard cries first, you lose, and you have to bring this venerable one a bowl of sour plum soup. If the cicadas in the trees cry first, this venerable one loses, and this venerable one will take you for a nice little trip down the mountain. Such a trip was an irresistible temptation. Chuaning obviously wished to ignore him, but over time, Taishanjun had come to a deep understanding of his weaknesses. He knew Chuaning couldn't refuse such an offer. The handsome man smiled. Then let's begin. 1, 2, 3. That low and magnetic voice counted off. Both of them listened carefully for shrilling or croaking, but this emperor of the mortal realm had encountered a run of bad luck. The cicadas cried louder and louder from the moment he started counting, while the lazy frogs had stopped their song. It seemed they were going to forfeit the match. 8, 9. The closer he got to 10, the slower he counted. By the end, it was blatantly cheating. Chuaning turned and glared at him. Taishanjun was far too shameless to care. Impervious to that glare, he stopped at 9 and turned to Chuaning. Do you think the frogs died? His question was met with stony silence. Why aren't they croaking? Chuaning didn't deign to respond. Hold on, this venerable one is going to check if they're still alive, or it's not fair. He picked up a pebble and tossed it at one hale and hearty green frog. 10. With a startled ribbit, the frog plunked into the pond. The sound of that croak spread with the ripples on the surface of the water, and Taishanjun burst into laughter. He dusted off his fingers and said, You lose. The frog croaked first. Chuaning turned to leave with a flick of his sleeves, but Taishanjun grabbed one fluttering hem. The cheater Taishanjun was delighted. Within the drifting fragrance coming off the lotuses in the lake, he grinned in the face of Chuaning's fury and said, I want chilled sour plum soup. Extra cold. Do you have any shame? Said Chuaning, teeth nearly cracking as he clenched his jaw. If it can't cool me down, what's the point? Taishanjun poked his forehead. Go on now. Remember, not too much sugar. He must have been in a wonderful mood. By the time he finished the entire jug of sweet and icy sour plum soup beneath the beating sun, even the croaking of the frogs sounded pleasing to the ear. At dusk, he said to Chu Wanning, out of the blue, "It's been almost 3 years." What? Displeasure appeared on the Emperor's youthful face. My enthronement. It's been almost 3 years since this venerable one became Emperor. Taishanjun searched Chu Wanning's eyes for any flicker of emotion, but found himself thwarted. He wrinkled his nose, vexed. You've been with this venerable one, he said after some thought. For 3 years. No reply came. Since that jug of sour plum soup tasted all right, this venerable one will bring you down the mountain. But not far. We'll stay in Wuchang Town. That's a scene break. The convoluted path to any hint of sentimentality around in this timeline an anniversary gives me hope. I don't have much, but I have just a little bit. She's given you just enough, just a little bit, to where it doesn't seem utterly hopeless. I said that was a scene break, right? That was a scene break. The carriage was made ready, complete with bamboo curtains, cooling cushions, cups of tea, and folding fans. Standing by the thrice-enlarged gates of Xisheng Peak, Taishanjun ran his hands along the circlet of gold and jade on the white horse's forehead and turned to look at Chu Wanning. Recognize it? It's the carriage you liked best back then. It wasn't taking up too much space, so I let them keep it around. He lied. Like a liar who lies. Chu Wanning expressed no happiness. Instead, he stepped onto the rosewood stool, just as he'd done in the past, and brushed the bamboo curtain aside to go in. The servants stared in tongue-tied shock. They turned in panic to Emperor Taishanjun, who stood bathed in the light of the setting sun. Their master had a dark temper, and often slaughtered innocents for less. Chuzongsha must have possessed impossible courage to ignore etiquette and step into the carriage ahead of His Majesty the Emperor. It would have never occurred to those poor servants that Taishanjun didn't mind at all. His eyes narrowed as he smiled in amusement. Would you look at that? He still thinks he's the Yuheng elder. Just as he was about to follow him in, a woman's silky voice sounded from behind him, speaking gently. Run. Okay, we're clearly not, that's the end of the chapter. We're clearly not leaving this moment? So, I mean, if it's Swabin Hunt's mom, this might be a short stream. I might have to get up and leave. We're on page 307 for chapter 292, and the title of this chapter is His Abyssal Heart. It is probably Song Chutong. That's my guess. I think a couple of people are, yeah. That's my best guess, is that it's Song Chutong, that we've brought a beauty feast back into the discussion. Taishanjun turned. Song Chutong was dressed in all her gorgeous finery, approaching with a retinue of servants. Instead of pushing the bamboo curtain up to enter, he surreptitiously clasped it close. What is it? He asked. This one was idle, so I came out for a post-dinner stroll. Song Chutong bowed, then looked sweetly at the carriage. Is Aran heading out? I'm off to Wuchang Town to see the night markets. She beamed, her smile delicately poised between intimacy and deference. Taking a carriage for such a short trip? You're not going alone, are you? At the time, Taishanjun had still been indulgent of his empress, so he smiled and answered, No, not alone. Song Chutong cast a fluid glance toward the rosewood stool, still waiting at the door of the carriage. She had a woman's careful mind, and soon had her answer. Her face froze minutely, her smile becoming stiff. Ah, could it be you're going with Consort Chumeme? It's not a difficult first guess, but Taishanjun could almost see the face Chuaning was making behind the curtain at being addressed thus. Resisting the urge to laugh, Taishanjun replied, That's right. Her smile brightened, so dazzling it seemed to dim the colors of the sunset, almost like it was performative. How marvelous! This one has been in the palace 3 years, yet I've only seen my little sister consort Chu on the day of her wedding, and veiled even then. How lucky we've run into each other like this today. She smiled. I'll run. Won't you introduce us sisters properly? Taishanjun shook his head. Consort Chu is naturally reserved, dislikes strangers, and is mute to boot. Better not. Song Chutong obeyed Mo Run's every word, but how could it not grate on her? She'd developed a bitter grudge against this Consort Chu since suffering the humiliation of being abandoned on her own wedding night. Afterward, she'd heard endless palace gossip about how the Emperor had remained sequestered in Consort Chu's rooms until nearly dusk the next day. He was at it all night. You wouldn't believe the sounds I heard. I heard from the guards on night watch. They got to at least 7 or 8, counting on their fingers. His Majesty has incredible stamina. One handmaiden giggled. Isn't Consort Chu the one with the stamina? 7 or 8 rounds in one night. Heavens, she'll bear us a little prince soon enough. Oh, I'm sure there's fan fiction. But what stung Song Chutong most of all were whispers like, Her Majesty the Empress is so beautiful. To think she couldn't hold his favor on her own wedding night. Or, it's completely unheard of. His Majesty doesn't show his Empress any respect at all. That veiled imperial consort Chu may as well have slapped her soundly across the face, and the burn of it had only grown worse over the past 3 years. In time, even her most trusted handmaiden became filled with resentment. What kind of vixen is that woman? She'd been known to hiss. The little minx has got his Majesty wrapped around her finger. Then she'd turn to Song Chutong and say, My lady, you mustn't take it to heart. His Majesty spends so many of his nights there, yet we've heard no word of an heir. She must be too weak to bear children. His Majesty is merely having his fun with her. He'll grow bored soon enough. Song Chutong had forced a smile. Even to her most trusted confidant, there were some things she couldn't voice without shame. Over the few nights they'd shared, the Emperor had always been careful to keep her from getting pregnant. The one time he'd spent himself inside her had only happened recently, when he'd run over to her rooms after getting into a huge drunken argument with Consort Chu. I'll hold that thought. She'd been sound asleep when the drapes around her bed were torn aside. Song Chutong had woken to see those scarlet eyes, devoid of rationality. He'd turned her over and ripped away her undergarments before she could react, ravaging her in a brutal show of force. In the midst of that frenzied torment, a hand fisted in her hair, yanking her head back, and a voice rasped in her ear. Who were you writing to in secret? Do you care for him so much? As she let her body go limp, lost in the sensations, she abruptly heard him murmur as he pressed against her back. You'll never see anyone, go anywhere. You'll only ever be this venerable one's Consort Chu, whether you like it or not. I'm just reminded of how, really, Wabanon is pulling at these strings. So, I'm just having nightmares about Song Chutong having been pregnant. That's. She blinked the humiliating memories away and composed herself, smiling prettily. Your Majesty might not care for etiquette, but we're sisters after all. I'd like to see her and bring her a few humble gifts. Although, if Taishanjun had genuinely mistaken Song Chutong as Chuaning, then maybe there isn't a risk of pregnancy, if you get my meaning. Your Majesty might not care for etiquette, but we're sisters after all. I'd like to see her and bring her a few humble gifts. Taishanjun's hand was tight on the bamboo curtain. No need. Consort Chu has all that's required. Song Chutong had played every card she had. She said a few more gentle words to him, then watched as he stepped into the carriage and left with that irksome vixen. That's a scene break. Behind the bamboo curtain, Tae-Shan-jun settled himself on the plush cushions, his stomach aching from holding in laughter. Excuse me with this art? I need context. Hang on. I did. Did I accident? No. Wait, did I? No, sorry. I got very confused there for a second. I'm incredibly overworked. Have I mentioned that? Did I have that disclaimer? I've been working 13-hour days. I go on vacation in 2 days. And I'm really earning it, boy. So we might be a little loopy, which is a great frame of mind to come at the end of volume 9 with. As emperor, he said in complete seriousness, perhaps it is not appropriate to dote on you so. Scowling, Chu Wanning turned to look out the window in silence. The burnt gold sunshine poured in through the curtain and painted thin stripes of shadow across his cheeks, pale almost to the point of translucency. Tae-Shan-jun watched him for a while, then leaned in close and put his head in Chu Wanning's lap. Chu Wanning stiffened. Isn't it too hot for this? He asked without glancing down. Beloved concubine, your tone is chilly enough. It keeps me quite cool. At last, Chu Wanning looked down at him, his gaze even more freezing than his voice. He was truly enraged. No man would willingly become another's concubine, and Song Chutong calling him consort Chumeme was an insult he couldn't swallow. Humiliation had reddened the tails of his eyes. When Tae-Shan-jun had made him his consort, he'd done so specifically to make him feel lower than a woman. Song Chutong was the true wife, while he, the Beidou immortal, was secondary, a concubine to a younger man. Are you angry? Chu Wanning chose not to dignify this question with a response. It's not as if this venerable one let her see you. What are you so upset about? Tae-Shan-jun had thought to keep teasing him, but when the setting sun slipped through the bamboo slats and fell upon Chu Wanning's face, it revealed eyes so coolly distant Tae-Shan-jun pursed his lips and fell silent. It was all so boring somehow. Neither of them spoke for the rest of the ride. And yet, somehow, they just look so cozy. That's not there we go. Oh, so sorry, we have some screen tear going on. I don't know why streams have decided to do that. Or really why my streaming software has decided to do that recently. But it's annoying. And usually I just have to restart OBS, which is the streaming software. So we're coming up on the midpoint. So you guys won't have to hop to a new stream or anything, but I will shut it down and restart it real quick to fix it. Because that's called screen tearing, and it's very preventable. But something between OBS and YouTube has been deeply annoying as of late. So if you ever see that and I haven't noticed it, like throw up some stop signs and red lights and stuff just to let me know, because it is deeply fixable. Where in the heck did I leave off? All right, we just did the art. When they arrived at Wuchang Town, he purchased all sorts of things. Sugar paintings, flower cakes, tonglu, lanterns, whatever caught his eye. His shopping soon filled the carriage, but Chu Wanning only stared past the bamboo curtain at the bustle outside and ignored the piles at his feet. It seemed nothing he did could make Chu Wanning happy. Tae-Shan-jun couldn't help feeling frustrated. Forget it. We won't go back tonight, he said out of nowhere. We'll stay here. He ordered the carriage driver to find them an inn, into which he and Chu Wanning, wearing a veiled hat, walked in together. The attendant, who had been nodding off, woke with a jolt, transforming his yawn into a plastered-on smile. Looking for a room? One of your best. Even with his face hidden from view by the veil, it was clear from Chu Wanning's physique that he was a man. The attendant stared in open curiosity. 2 rooms, said Chu Wanning. Taishanjun's fury finally snapped its tether. What are we to each other? 2 rooms? Is there a point in trying to hide anything? If the attendant had merely been suspicious before, his doubts had now been put to rest. His expression of shock pleased Taishanjun to no end. Once the room was ready, he gleefully dragged Chu Wanning up by the arm and kissed him hard before even closing the door properly, his tongue probing urgently. Beyond the carved grapevines of the latticed window were the lights of so many family homes, but that light had nothing to do with them. He shoved Chu Wanning down on the bed. Alongside the suggestive creak of the frame, he heard Chu Wanning's soft question. Mo-run, what's the point of all this? Taishanjun had no answer. What's the point of us? Wabinon Spank Bank? I mean, that's a really complicated question, Chu Wanning. These words were too cutting. Even now, the memory made his heart twist. Taishanjun opened his eyes. He stood in the empty Red Lotus Pavilion, and those events were far in the past. An illusion seemed to flash before his eyes. The sound of torrential rainfall echoed in his ears. He felt like a ghost in the night, peering in through that carved window. He saw the same room and the same people. The only difference was the storm outside, and the love he could feel in the bed. He saw himself at Chu Wanning tangled in the sheets. It was dark in the room, but he was sure of what he saw in Chu Wanning's face. Veiled desire, his eyes half-lidded. Limbs entwined with his own, ashamed and yet passionate. In the vision, he stared adoringly down at the man beneath him. Tonight, he said, half imploring and half firm. I just want to make you feel good. He bent to kiss and suck at Chu Wanning's cock and heard the gasps he'd hoped for. Chu Wanning's fingers sank into his hair. Taishanjun brought a hand to his forehead. It ached fit to split. The memories of 2 lifetimes overlapped and clashed, ripping into each other in an attempt to take control. Which was real? Which was a dream? He didn't know, and he was too afraid to find out. He collected himself only with difficulty, then tore out of the Red Lotus Pavilion. When he arrived at the Dancing Sword platform, he stopped and stood by the white jade railings. He stared into the distance, breathing hard. What were those amorous memories? Were they from the other worlds, Mo-run? He couldn't help thinking of Chu Wanning's soft and misty gaze, the way he'd moaned on the bed with his head thrown back. Taishanjun's fingers tightened on the railing. Had Chu Wanning willingly gone to bed with that thrice-damned Mozongsha? They were inarguably the same person, yet Taishanjun's fury blazed higher and hotter, dyeing his eyes crimson. If those really were his other self's memories. Hate and dissatisfaction swallowed him whole. Why? How? After Hua Binan had dragged him back to life and turned him into this shambling corpse, all he had was the destroyed Wushan Palace and an endless, nauseating mess to clean up. When he ran in a panic to the Red Lotus Pavilion, what had he seen? Leaves withered and dead without spiritual energy, high-tongue flowers strewn over the ground, empty rooms, that lotus pond without its inhabitant. Hua Binan had yanked him out of hell, but Chu Wanning's corpse had already dissolved into ash. Nothing was left, not one scrap of his remains. He remembered stumbling to the edge of the pond and staring expressionlessly down at its surface. He cupped a handful of the water. It was deep and cold, chilling him to the bone. He shuddered. The water spilled from his hands and he sank to the ground. Despite his return to life, what did he have left? He hated living more. He hated living more with every day that passed, but he was not his own master. He had no choice. He had to obey Hua Binan. Later, Hua Binan found a fissure in space-time, but refused to tell him who had made it. That bastard cheerfully slipped off into the other world, leaving him here to slave away. His small consolation was the news Hua Binan brought him from time to time to keep him updated on the happenings in the other world. He learned that part of his soul had been reborn there. He learned of Shimei, Shuimong, and the long-dead Yuangshi and Nengongse. He also learned of Chuaning. Hua Binan's letters were always brief. Tishanjun despised his handwriting, each stroke so sharp it resembled a scorpion's pincers. Serial killer handwriting, you say? Yet his letters became that living dead man's only hope. They were like a breath of air to a drowning man. With every letter he received, each time a new one came in, he would read and reread the words written in that hand he loathed several hundred times over. He was convinced he'd gone insane. Convinced he'd gone insane. Now he was convinced he'd gone insane. This is, God, dear Lord, this is like Will Graham asking if Hannibal is in love with him. At night, the servants ate their dinners. He liked this kind of busy atmosphere, so he made them all gather at the hall, just like before. He'd sprawl on the throne and watch them eat, and from time to time he'd ask how the food tasted. Tishanjun had never liked reading, but he'd spent all these years alone. The long nights were dull, and his only pastime was reading those bamboo scrolls. Slowly, he too began to develop an appreciation for the descriptive potential of language. Sometimes, when he wanted them to have some crispy scorched rice, he'd say, "Come, eat one of those guoba for this venerable one. They're mind-shatteringly crunchy." If he wanted them to eat spinach with red stems, he'd say, "Try a bite. The taste is..." He's got jokes. Try a bite. The taste is unbelievable. Listen, I fully cannot clown nor judge this man because I regularly, instead of saying belief, I regularly say belief. Just because, I don't know, it makes me giggle, makes the wife, giggle. I've got no legs to stand on in this moment. Motivating an illiterate to pick up a book was a challenge indeed, and if that illiterate came to delight in the act, perhaps the only conclusion one could draw was that he had very few delights left to him. On this night, midway through their meal, someone came in with a report. "Your Majesty, the senior sage has returned." "Just him?" "He's come with the Pavilion Master Mu of Tianyin Pavilion. They say they're preparing the offerings, and they will meet with your Majesty once they're done." Tishanjun plucked a purple grape from a silver platter, his expression unchanged. "Then let them take their time. This venerable one enjoys the break." "Also," the messenger continued, "the senior sage has a reminder from your Majesty." "What is it?" "Your Majesty must be vigilant over the next few days. The world is in chaos. He is sure to come." Tishanjun's eyes darkened. After a beat, he grinned. Understood. This venerable one knows what he's about. Of course he would come. The two worlds had combined, and tens of thousands of refugees were fleeing the effects of their merging. Mo Zongshou was dead, and Xisheng Peak had fallen. He and Chu Wanning were alike in one thing. They had nothing left. Chu Wanning would find him, heedless of his own life. That's what I'm fucking banking on. What do you gotta do to see a tree around here? Merged timelines, apparently. Tishanjun wasn't afraid. Rather, he felt a mysterious thrill of anticipation. I feel like that would be the Mo Run part of him. Sort of. Night fell. Candlelight filled the palace like so many stars. Wushan Palace alone had its 9,999 lamps lit, their brightness rivaling the sun. Summoning Lu Gong, Tishanjun ordered, "Have them put out half the lights." It was too bright. Chu Wanning would have a hard time sneaking in like this, so he lowered their defenses. Lu Gong went off to do his bidding. Tishanjun stood waiting. When Lu Gong returned, he said, "Your Majesty, half the lights are out." Taishanjun looked out at the dim glow filling the hall and was yet unsatisfied. After some thought, he said, "Just put them all out." Lu Gong goggled at him. Every lamp in Wushan Palace was doused, but Taishanjun's heart had begun to brighten. He could feel that Chu Wanning was almost here. He'd come dressed in white, glaring furiously as he spat those irritating precepts of righteousness. He'd surely want to exact revenge for Mo Zhongshe. "Oh, what you don't understand, Taishanjin. I don't think that's what he's after at all." The thought excited him further. He licked his lips, running his tongue over his teeth. Only one copper lamp remained lit in the depths of those gauzy drapes. It was the flame he'd prepared for the despairing moth that was Chu Wanning, to signal that he was waiting for him to fly over and seek his own destruction. The night darkened. Rain began to fall outside the windows. Taishanjun changed into his most magnificent gold-embroidered black robes and carefully straightened the bedsheets and pillows with his own hands. He paced around the room, feeling there was something missing, then ordered his attendants to bring him a jar of aged pearl blossom white and keep it warmed in water. This man heated fine wine, wore his best clothes, and waited by the bedside, staring out at the rainstorm beyond the window. Throughout, he never summoned so much as a shadow of Bugui. But still he convinced himself otherwise, standing guard with his wine and his fluffed pillows, thinking murderously, "Once Chu Wanning gets here, I'll show him a pitiless fight." It's the end of the chapter. So I don't think that's how you set up a pitiless fight. That's not even how you set up a different pitiless F word. Oh, jeez. Well, we're bang on for halfway through the stream. So when we come back from the break with a fixed stream, we'll be on page 319 for chapter 293, which is called The Emperor's Lament. I'm going to have that song from Nightmare Before Christmas stuck in my head because it's one of the most iconic things to ever exist. And in the meantime, please take some comfort in Mei Han Shuel in the break room. And when we come back, we'll finally finish the volume. And we'll finish the volume with an appearance from the tree. Let me stop. I'll be right back. If Tae-Shan-jun gets stood up at the end of this volume, I'm rioting. We all seem to agree that the big Tae-Shan-jun turnaround isn't going to happen until volume 10, which makes sense. Am I the hoper of far-flung hopes? The dreamer of impossible dreams? The greater fool, as the newsroom would put it? Yeah. That's why I asked the question. But realistically, I'm going to have to wait until fucking February. Late February. To find out. Maddie was very, very kind and gifted like 15 channel memberships to people. Thank you, Maddie. You did this. Liv, really extended people's memberships in the book chat today. What a lovely way to end the year. Thank you so much, guys. That's so sweet of you. And it really does help out the channel. And it helps out just people in general. They have a gifting thing on Patreon as well that I really need to get figured out, because that's one of my favorite things to just enable for people. I want you guys to take care of each other as much as you take care of yourselves. We are on page 319 for chapter 293, called The Emperor's Lament. I'm half expecting him to walk down that weird rolling hill with the moon at his back at this point. By midnight, Chu Wanning still had not come. Tae-Shan-jun first became frustrated, then gloomy, then worried. Those lavish black robes swept across the golden paving stones. He paced back and forth, unable to keep himself from wondering, had something happened to Chu Wanning? The space-time gate of life and death had been torn open. Chu Wanning should have come to Wushan Palace in search of him, whether to learn the truth or attempt to stop him. Given the Beidou Immortal's temper, he'd come kick up a fuss even if he was missing a limb. So why hadn't he come? Is he sick? Absolutely not. He'd come even if he was ill. Does he not know? If he didn't before, the transformation of the sky and the earth after the rift made it impossible for him not to have realized. Or could it be? Tae-Shan-jun froze in place. In the dim candlelight, that black silhouette looked like a jagged-edged horror. Is he dead? His nails sank deep into his palms at the thought. I'm anxious to all hell. We're collecting ourselves. Tae-Shan-jun clenched his jaw, and his whole body began to shake. 8 years together in Wushan Palace, 2 years with his corpse. He and Chu Wanning had spent the greater part of their lives together. It was little wonder that finding even his ashes gone upon returning to life had driven Tae-Shan-jun past the point of madness. He could accept Shime's death, though he hoped with everything he had that he would return to life. He could not accept Chu Wanning's death and remain sane. Night had fallen. The candle in that final lamp was guttering on its last inch of wick. Wax had pooled at the base of the lamp, but the moth did not come. The fear in his heart intensified, spreading through his limbs like ink on paper. He peered around the room like a circling vulture, pacing back and forth. Finally, he collapsed back against his bed. It was then that he heard a faint noise on the roof. Tae-Shan-jun jolted to his feet. Light and warmth seemed to rush back into his body. His eyes burned with a terrifying brightness, only half hatred. Had he been handed a mirror at that moment, he'd have seen that his face was the very image of the spurned Empress Chen Ajiao as she sang Changmen Lament after losing the Emperor's favor, miserable wives stewing in resentment, waiting for a man who would not come. A footnote. Changmen Lament is a Qin piece based on a series of poems named after the palace of Empress Chen. It describes her misery upon losing favor with Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty. He ground his teeth. Taishanjun didn't wait for his opponent to make a move before kicking open the doors and leaping onto the roof in the pouring rain. "Chuaning!" he cried, frenzied. "Did his death reduce you to this? Have you forsaken even your precious mortal world?" He struck out blindly in the storm. Their opening blows filled the sky with the harsh clanging of weaponry. "Haven't you always said to put the people before the self? Were you so devastated you waited until now to come duel this venerable one? You call yourself Yuheng of the night sky. Is the Beidou immortal so pathetic?" His opponent finally spoke, voice muffled by the downpour. What the hell? Taishanjun narrowed his eyes. This wasn't Chuaning's voice. A knife of lucidity slashed through his rage. When his opponent brought his weapon down on him again, the hot madness in his eyes had cooled. Bugui flared green. He struck. With a harsh clang, his opponent's weapon snapped in two before it could answer Bugui's glow with its own. Bugui's brutal strength had left it in pieces on the roof tiles. What rat bastard is this? Taishanjun was doubly irritated at mistaking the interloper for Chuaning, trying to kill this venerable one without a proper holy weapon. He leveled the point of his sword at his opponent's downturned face. "Raise your head," he hissed. The man slowly obeyed. Lightning crackled across the sky, illuminating his pale face. Taishanjun's nose wrinkled, his expression dangerous. "You again." I'm actually fucking ill. I'm actually fucking sick with concern. Shuimeng rose, hands shaking. Taishanjun looked down and saw Longcheng in two pieces, shattered on the soaked roof tiles, and understood. Oh, we understand the metaphor, yeah. Ugh. He watched the sodden young man from behind dark lashes. "Perhaps I shouldn't say again," said Taishanjun. "I should say, so it's you, dear little brother." Thunder pealed like a drum about to split. Shuimeng closed his eyes. "This is the first time you fought this venerable one, isn't it?" Taishanjun continued. "How sweet. You're much cuter now than you ended up being in this world." "Give me back." Shuimeng's throat seemed to close as soon as he started speaking, but he pushed through. "Give me back my mom and dad." "You already said that to this venerable one in your previous life." Shuimeng's eyes flew open, fury and grief blazing in his gaze. "Give me back my ge!" This time, there was a too long pause before Taishanjun scoffed. "Being a Zongsha really is a sweet deal. All of you miss him so very much. But did he never tell you that he was me, reborn?" He remembered all the sin and hatred of the past life. Taishanjun's eyes glinted with frost, his teeth deadly fangs. He was a liar. Really? This really had to be the way he found out, huh? Shui Meng and Taishan Jun faced each other on the roof like two shadowed beasts locking horns. Taishan Jun's fury grew, his features twisting. That bastard lied to have peace in that life. He lied to have a brother, lied so he'd be surrounded by friends and family, lied to build his reputation as the great Mozongsha. He deserved to die. How was he any different from this venerable one? Through gritted teeth, Shui Meng said, "You two are nothing alike." Rain funneled through the grooves in the tiles beneath their feet. Taishan Jun barked a laugh. "Ridiculous. How are we not alike? In what way? You think he was pure? 100 years in this rain couldn't wash the filth from him." Shui Meng's long lashes were spiked with rainwater. "You're two different people." "Fuck your mother. Two different people, my ass," said Taishan Jun, cool and malicious. "Keep closing your eyes to the truth, then." Considering Madame Wong's recent demise, these words were unspeakably crass. Shui Meng snarled, flame rising in his palm as he brought a spell slamming down on the Emperor. Yet not even the Shui Meng from 10 years later was a match for Taishan Jun, let alone this puppy on the roof tonight. Taishan Jun dodged the attack with no change in expression. The spirit flame whistled past without singeing a hair on his head. He reached out and caught Shui Meng's arm with ease. Those purple-black eyes slid toward the eaves. "Excuse me. Hang on. I'm processing, please." That's why. All right. That took me a second to catch up with what was... Okay. Again, I don't think I've had a day off in about a month, so... Those purple-black eyes slid toward the eaves. "You two down there better get the hell out, or this venerable one might just crush this birdie's precious claws." The May brothers leapt onto the roof, one cradling his chin, while the other drew his sword. Taishan Jun glanced at them, unsurprised. "You two live such interesting lives," he scoffed. "In either world, no matter what, you stand beside Shui Meng." "Meat Bun, you can't do this to me, okay? I'm in public, Meat Bun. You can't be doing this. You can't." "Also, please, for the love of God, let there still be two brothers at the end of this volume." The older brother said nothing, while the younger grinned back at Taishan Jun. "Why shouldn't we? Does your Majesty the Emperor imagine everyone is like you, vindictive, pitiless, and cruel?" The word struck Taishan Jun like a slap. Chu Wanning, Shui Jingyang, and Wang Chuqing's faces flashed before his eyes. Vindictive, pitiless, cruel. He forced his lip to curl into a sneer. "It seems you two are looking to die." Tendons stood out on his arms as he yanked Shui Meng's head back by the hair. "Shui Meng is at least the Beidou Immortal's cherished disciple. You two have no connection at all to this venerable one. Aren't you scared I'll mince you up for dumpling filling?" Shui Meng's temper flared at the mention of Chu Wanning. "How dare you bring up Shizun, you beast, you monster!" "And why shouldn't this venerable one dare?" Taishan Jun raised Shui Meng up to stare into his rain-soaked face. "Sorry, I just realized what the fuck else could finally be revealed to Shui Meng. Hang on. Whoa, slow down. Everybody, hang on. Whoa. All right. Oh, no. Listen, I'm already, and now this, okay. He he's not wet, he's urgent. He suddenly thought of those scattered memories belonging to Mozongsha. The moonlit sword ride on Flying Flower Isle, the rainy night at Wuchang Town, even the foggy mists of Melodic Springs, Jealousy sprouted in his heart like weeds. Go on, he said darkly. Tell this venerable one what I should and shouldn't dare. Did that good and righteous Gaga of yours never tell you what Chuaning is to this venerable one? Shuimong jerked in his hold, his eyes gone wide. What are you talking about? Don't tell me you didn't notice. Taishanjun stared into his eyes, reveling in the feeling of pressing his prey closer and closer to the precipice. The way they act around each other, the rumors people repeat. Shuimong froze. He shuddered in Taishanjun's hold, which only pleased Taishanjun further. Yes, just like this. He wanted to stain Chuaning, to make him filthy. Wasn't that goddamn Mozongsha always so polite and deferential toward Chuaning, so terrified people would find out about them? He refused to let that false gentleman succeed. Come on. Do you not really not know? No, don't say it. So you do know. Shuimong shivered, his scalp prickling. Don't say it! Taishanjun burst into laughter, his eyes ferocious and mad. You do. You knew all along. Mo-run! You knew Chuaning was in this venerable one's bed. Why didn't I guess this? Of course! Of fucking course it's gonna be Taishanjun that tells. Fuck me. Shuimong stilled. Even the storm seemed to quiet around them. The sight of Shuimong's hollow eyes and shaking body filled Taishanjun with glee, so he tore into the young man's heart again, harder. Isn't it funny? In the past life and this one, this venerable one fucked your Shizin. In Wuchang Town's Fengya Inn, in Melodic Springs at Xishang Peak, in the guest room at Taobao Estate. Not just once, but over and over again. Eyes dull, Shuimong stood frozen. That reminds me. Taishanjun's eyes flashed dark and cruel. He bared his teeth. That big brother you're shielding, he defiled your Shizin. Right in front of you. Before you went up Mount Jiao, when you went to Chuaning's room, you reached out and touched his forehead. You asked him if he had a fever. Shuimong's face drained of color. Can't you think of any reason why Chuaning's cheeks might be flushed? Taishanjun's mouth twisted into a smile. Why he had tears in his eyes? Enough! But his fury was useless. It only goaded Taishanjun on. Behind the curtain, beneath the blankets, your dear Gaga had your Shizin in his mouth. He was having him, don't you see? Shuimong's face went red and white and then green, passing through every hue in between. He turned, sick to his stomach, and dry-heaved with a spasm. Goose flesh had broken out all over his body. The demon was delighted with the reaction he'd gotten. He laughed wildly, his eyes glinting bright. How about now? Do you still insist your Ga is different from this venerable one? He never told you the filthy things he did, so you thought he was. An earth-shattering boom swallowed the rest. Taishanjun whirled to see flames rising from the heaven-piercing tower. Countless fey beasts transformed into beams of golden light, arcing out into the downpour. What's this? The thrum of chin strings answered him. Like a phoenix's cry, the heavenly music threaded through the air, coaxing those fey beasts to take form. They dove, clawing at the air toward a point on the ground, the wood elemental fey beasts at their head. Taishanjun's pupils shrank. Juga. Without sparing another glance at Shuimong, Taishanjun sprang into the sky, summoning Bugui with a flick of his fingers as he dashed off in the direction of the heaven-piercing tower. The grounds around the tower had become a sea of flame. Countless Genlong pawns were fighting with the fey beasts, and at the core of the clashing forces were two men, both dressed in pristine white. One stood with his hands behind his back, Hua Binan controlling his pawns. The other glared daggers. Chuaning, playing his chin in battle. He's here! No! My baby's here. My baby's here. He's here. Everything's gonna be okay. The tree's here! Oh, it really is Christmas. We have a tree. At the sight of Yuhung of the night sky, with his robes fluttering amidst the flames, Taeshunjun felt a wash of pure relief. Girl, same. Chu Wanning had finally come, yet his relief swiftly turned into fury. Even though Chu Wanning had come, he hadn't come to him. He'd sought Hua Binan out first. He'd tricked him into waiting in Wushan Palace for so long. What are you doing standing there? Hua Binan's spiritual energy was weak. He was relying completely on the pawns to keep Chu Wanning at bay. When he caught sight of Taeshunjun, he gritted his teeth. Hurry up and help me! Taeshunjun's head ached, but he obeyed. He fluttered down and stood before Hua Binan, a dim glow flashing in his palms as the blade appeared in his hands once again. Go. This venerable one will take it from here. The fight had already taxed Hua Binan considerably. He was on the verge of defeat. Taeshunjun had arrived not a moment too soon. Be careful, he said, relieved. Once you've defeated him, lock him up. We can't afford for him to escape and ruin our plans. With a flash, he disappeared into the night. Taeshunjun turned back to his opponent. Chu Wanning, this venerable one knew you wouldn't be able to stand by, but I didn't think you'd go to him first, spoiling for a fight. Chu Wanning's face was bloodless, his eyes shadowed. His expression was unreadable. Why didn't you come to this venerable one first, huh? He made no reply. Between him and Taeshunjun, it was Chu Wanning who more resembled a corpse. It was as though the souls in the Beidou immortal's body had been stripped away, leaving only instinct to guide him in completing his final task on Earth. Taeshunjun rose into the air, and the two exchanged a flurry of blows. Eyes narrow, Taeshunjun met each swift strike, watching Chu Wanning in the fire and rain. Because you'd fear you'd lose, he brought his blade down against the power of the Qin music. Because you couldn't face Shui Meng. Pain ate at him, and his movements grew more malicious. Every strike was impossibly fast, impossibly powerful. Mo Zongxia's spiritual core had made him unstoppable. He'd already closed in on Chu Wanning's chin. Or is it because... Jealousy dripped off the words. Jiga's golden light interlaced with Bugui's jade halo. The sword came down and the chin shrilled. A sweep of Chu Wanning's fingers brought down an unbreakable barrier. With an explosive hiss of spiritual energy, Taeshunjun's sword came to a halt against it. Through that thin shield patterned with high tongue petals, they met each other's eyes. Is it because... The glow in Taeshunjun's hands dimmed. When it flared once more, it was no longer the jade of wood, but the red of fire, the spiritual stream most favored by Mo Zongxia. Chu Wanning froze. Gold and scarlet clashed, the sparks pouring off their fight, rivaling the deluge around them. Behind the barrier, Taeshunjun's handsome face took on a gentle cast. Shizun, is it because... Beneath those thick lashes, his eyes were soft with plaintive sorrow. You can't bear to watch me die a second time. Strings clanged as Chu Wanning plucked the wrong note. The light of his barrier dimmed and Bugui slammed down. The golden veil shattered, disintegrating in a flurry of high-tongue blossoms. Brutal spiritual energy overpowered him. Just before he plummeted to the muddy ground below, an arm reached out and wrapped around his waist. Chu Wanning knew he'd been tricked. Moe you, he snarled. Drenched by the sheeting rain, Taeshunjun burst into gleeful laughter. The curve of his lips betrayed a twisted satisfaction. At last he'd gotten what he wanted. That flash of gentleness disappeared as quickly as it had come. When he spoke again, it was with fangs bared. Very good. You're finally speaking to me. Taeshunjun gripped his jaw, yanking his face so close their noses were almost brushing. If you hadn't said anything, he said, voice going low and silky, this venerable one would have taken you for a mute. the end of the chapter. Oh, Lord. We're on page 329 for chapter 294, which is called On a Dark and Rainy Night. It's um you know, I feel like if she doesn't make you fear for um uh Chuaning's yeah, like at least once a volume, she doesn't feel like she's doing her job, so we should have figured. Did I say what the fuck the name of the chapter was? I don't remember. I don't know. I just don't know. It's called On a Dark and Rainy Night, all right? Oh, thank you. Liberty Rose has the best idea. Hold my fucking hand, please. We are holding hands for this, especially what the first line implies. This was no place to talk. Taishan Jun dragged Chu Wanning through the rain and back to Wushan Palace in the blink of an eye. Shui Meng was no longer on the roof, but that was no surprise. The Mei brothers were too clever not to understand when to make a calculated retreat. He strode over the threshold, passing from the tempestuous rain into the dry warmth of the hall. The lamp he'd lit for Chu Wanning had gone out, but Taishan Jun didn't mind. If the moth wouldn't come to his flame, he would deign to be the spider, 8 legs scuttling as he whisked his prey back to its lair. He shoved Chu Wanning onto the bed and stared icily down at the man, pale and silent beneath him. There was much Taishan Jun wanted to say, but when his lips moved, what came out was painfully petty. So, he hissed, this venerable one has to act like him for you to even look at me. He grabbed Chu Wanning by the jaw, forcing those pitch-black eyes to meet his own. The skin beneath his fingers was chilled and clammy. Chu Wanning, you'd better get something straight. The words were squeezed through a clenched jaw. Mo Zongshe is dead. It doesn't matter how badly you want him back. He won't return. The words stabbed at Chu Wanning. Something seemed to shudder behind his unfeeling mask, but this reaction only fanned the flames of Taishan Jun's jealousy. Anger rose in him as he bent to crush his mouth against Chu Wanning's freezing lips. Progressing from kissing him to undressing him was a familiar process. This man was as unyielding as any bone, but he'd gnawed on him for so many years. He knew better than anyone where to set his teeth to swallow him whole. Chu Wanning fought back just as he had in the past life. Taishan Jun countered him easily as breathing, then grabbed the pill he'd prepared beside the bed and brought it to Chu Wanning's lips. It's been a long time after all. This venerable one doesn't want to see you unwilling. Go on. Swallow. As Chu Wanning knit his brows and thrashed, Taishan Jun's eyes went chillier still. He shoved the pill in with brutal force, making Chu Wanning's mouth bleed before he succeeded. Then he bent down and caught those thin lips with his own. His tongue dove in, shoving against the pill that would render him pliant and pushing it roughly into Chu Wanning's mouth. A thick bloodiness spread between their mouths. That soft tongue pushed the pill to the back of his throat, unable to escape. Chu Wanning finally swallowed. The instant Mo Run released him, he doubled over and gagged, his chest working violently as he dry-heaved. Just a little pill and you're choking. Why didn't you spit anything out when you had your mouth on him? Chu Wanning went ashen. He turned, eyes wide as if he'd seen a ghost, and stared into Taishan Jun's pale and mocking countenance. What? You thought no one would ever find out what you did with him? Glee and hatred melded in Taishan Jun's expression. No one knows that dirty business better than this venerable one. He peeled off his rain-soaked robes and climbed onto the bed. The rich furs sank beneath his weight, his broad and muscular back curved as he bent over the man under him, caging him within his arms. Taishan Jun's damp hair fell around him, splashing a drop of rain onto Chuaning's cheek. He drank in the sight. Eyes darkening, he lowered his head and licked up that crystalline bead. Feeling Chuaning tense, he smiled. How are you still so sensitive? There was no response. The Chuaning of the past might have flown into a rage and told him to get the hell out, but this man, hollowed by grief, only bit his lip. He refused to speak, much less curse him out. Yet his whole being was shivering, from the tips of his fingers to the very marrow of his bones. He despised the way this body betrayed him. His discomfort, conversely, made Taishanjun calmer. He watched Chuaning flush from panic and the effects of the drug and murmured, "You know, he never actually managed to get it in you, did he?" His hands groped their way lower. "Tell me," he whispered into Chuaning's ear, "are you still as tight back there as you used to be?" His was an impeccably handsome face, yet the words were pure filth. His voice was velveted with desire while his hands roved unfettered over Chuaning. His caresses seemed to heighten the effect of the drug. Taishanjun gazed into that face he'd yearned for so desperately and swallowed. His voice husky with lust. "If you don't answer me, I'll test it for myself. Let's see if you've missed me there." The drug was potent and worked quickly. Chuaning's skin prickled. He couldn't summon the slightest resistance. As Taishanjun slotted himself between his thighs and propped Chuaning's legs on his shoulders. Chuaning squeezed his eyes shut, his lashes quivering. It was nothing like his previous trysts with Morun. Taishanjun had never bothered with foreplay and was tender with him only in the rarest moments. Chuaning could hear him undressing, then feel the heat of him pressed up against his skin, fervent, urgent, awaiting release. Someone suddenly knocked on the door. "Your Majesty, the senior sage asks that you—" "Fuck off!" His roar was accompanied by the sound of shattering porcelain. He'd hurled a teacup in the direction of that ill-timed servant before they could take a step inside. The door was instantly drawn shut. No one would dare interrupt any more. Taishanjun ran a calloused thumb over Chuaning's lips. "See? It's just us, no one else. Never anyone else." The storm raged outside, thunder and lightning howling a dissonant duet. The Emperor's bed in Wushan Palace, empty for so many years, finally welcomed Chuaning back. Taishanjun studied his every reaction beneath him, watched his skin flushed red from the aphrodisiac's effects. He felt like the fire that died in his heart years ago had come back to life this night. His consort Chu, his Waning, his rekindled humanity. Within the drapes of this warm and fragrant bed, they'd all come back into his arms. No one will disturb us again. Shizun, this venerable one's consort Chu. Emperor Taishanjun bent low to whisper in Chuaning's ear. They say a reunion after long separation is sweeter than the wedding night. You and this venerable one have parted so long. You can't say this venerable one isn't a dutiful husband. He reached for Chuaning's hand. Slowly, he unbent Chuaning's curled and shaking fingers and brought them to his lips. He kissed them over and over, then pulled Chuaning's hand down and wrapped his fingers around where Taishanjun was already hard, aching to be touched. Taishanjun moaned, intentionally loud and rough, bent on making Chuaning feel the humiliation of serving a man, bent on making it clear that the one on top of him was the fearless Taishanjun, and not the guiltless coward Mozongshe. Mozongshe. The thought of the adoration his other self had received from Chuaning inflamed him with jealousy, a blaze that licked up to redden his eyes. Keeping his own hand tight around Chuaning's, Taishanjun bucked upward into their combined grip. "Concubine, darling, do you feel that?" he murmured, heated. "This venerable one owes you so many years of imperial favor. You miss it very much, don't you?" The jet of his throat bobbed, his low and raspy voice burrowing into Chuaning's bones. "Don't worry. Morning is far away. We can go as long as you'd like. This venerable one will see that you get your fill." Such words were beyond ridiculous. He was the one who wanted it so bad he was flustered, so bad the rims of his eyes had gone red, so bad he could think of nothing but devouring this man's sinew and bone. Yet he couldn't resist slandering him, insisting it was Chu Wanning who was desperate, putting on this show of selflessly offering to satisfy his consort's desires. Now that I can see Hua Binan in the room, I'm legitimately, it's like I've been doing continual crunches for the past like 10 minutes. Like my stomach is like absolutely, I have not unclenched, and I still haven't at this fucking moment. Only Taeshun Jun, and Taeshun Jun alone, could provoke the last wisp of human emotion this hollowed out Chu Wanning possessed. His red and teary phoenix eyes flew open, glaring back in dull rage. Taeshun Jun sighed in satisfaction. It's been so long since you've looked at this venerable one like that. I would recognize that gaze anywhere. He bent and sucked Chu Wanning's soft earlobe into his mouth. It was one of Chu Wanning's most sensitive spots. There was no way he could control himself now that he'd been drugged. Pleasure raced up his spine like a bolt of lightning. Chu Wanning was shaking, but his reaction earned him even wilder ministrations from Taeshun Jin. He mouthed at Chu Wanning, his tongue delving into the contours of his ear in an unmistakable rhythm, wet and scalding. Drifting amidst the blinding stimulation, Chu Wanning heard him mumble, "You should have an earring here." It was the voice of a tyrant, suppressing his boundless rage, yet also the ceaseless sorrow buried in the heart of an abandoned dog. Taeshun Jun dropped a few more kisses on the spot where he'd pierced Chu Wanning's ear in the past life, as if to prove to himself that this man had returned to his possession. Then he sprang into action, rough with need. Take it. He angled Chu Wanning's hand to press the straining tip of himself against the entrance he spent years longing for. Put it in yourself. Chu Wanning gritted his teeth and tried to shake off his hold. But Taeshun Jun was terribly strong, and he was bringing all that strength to bear now, veins standing out on his arms. Put it in, insisted Taeshun Jun. He pushed against that entrance as if his only wish was to desecrate him. His cockhead shoved against that tight furl, slick pre-cum easing the way. He remained there, neither pushing in nor pulling away, simply pressed up against him. Their breathing grew frantic. Taeshun Jun wanted nothing more than to thrust himself inside, to make this man he'd missed so much swallow him to the hilt. As for Chu Wanning, he'd already bitten his lips bloody. He panted, wide-eyed yet silent, refusing to obey. He stared sorrowfully at the man above him, and after a long beat, choked out, "Moran." The rest is in his head. He does not say this out loud. I don't know what it is yet. I just see italics. Moran. This isn't who you are. This isn't you. It was this master, in the past life in this one, who failed to protect you. I've watched you go mad in 2 lifetimes. I've watched you die in 2 lifetimes. It's my fault. I did so much, but it was all for nothing. I couldn't save you. Why are you? Taeshun Jun blinked. Why are you crying? Was he? Chu Wanning couldn't tell. The heat in him burned too fiercely. Taeshun Jun must have been determined to reduce him to mud, feeding him such a strong aphrodisiac. Only after Taeshun Jun spoke did Chu Wanning sense something hot and wet sliding from the corners of his eyes to soak into his hair. Taeshun Jun's expression went strange. That look resembled anger, or maybe jealousy, confusion, or... Chu Wanning closed his eyes. He must be insane. could delude himself that he saw heartache in those purple-black eyes. It was pure delusion. Yet in that small lapse of silence, Tishanjun gathered him up and crushed him to his chest as if he'd shatter. He said nothing, forced him to do nothing else for the moment. He settled Chuaning in his lap, then bent his handsome face and kissed him deeply. Wanning. The kiss was sloppy and rushed, pained and maddened. Tishanjun wrapped his broad palms around Chuaning's waist, then pawed in frustration within the depths of the bedding until he retrieved a bottle of ointment, one that'd been well prepared long ago, perhaps excessively too long. Chuaning's ears rang, his scalp went numb at the sight. Eternal passion aphrodisiac. It was the ointment Tishanjun had used on him once before. Even buried as he was in his grief, Chuaning felt the terror that hummed in his bones. He'd experienced the power of this aphrodisiac in the past, and he'd already been force-fed one pill. Would this madman, Tishanjun, really go so far as to... Chuaning pushed him away, frantic, but he had no strength left in him. No, Morun, don't. Shh. Tishanjun's eyes flashed. This venerable one is different from that man. A little of this, and you'll understand this venerable one is the only one who can make you feel so good you start dripping. That goody two-shoes? What does he know? He dug his fingers into the ointment. Ignoring Chuaning's protests, he pushed it into his opening. Chuaning whimpered, the lines of his fiercely muscled back and waist tensing. Tishanjun merely took it as encouragement to shove more ointment inside him, spreading it as far as he could reach. You've bloodied your lips, he said, working him open. If anyone sees, they'll assume this venerable one's been bullying you. He stared fixedly at him, eyes dark. What will they think then? Or do you want everyone to know the kind of slut you are? That the noble Beidou immortal who looks so haughty and aloof gets on his knees for this venerable one? That this venerable one has been in him too many times to count? Chuaning's breath came in feverish pants. His limbs were locked tight, yet he couldn't stop himself from shaking. Ah, Consort Chu. This venerable one often wondered over the years, would things have turned out better for us if you had been a woman? I favored you and you alone for so many nights. Who knows how many children you would have borne, this venerable one. Tishanjun's fingers squelched obscenely inside him, while his other hand ran along Chuaning's weakening waist. He touched every inch of him, from the curve of his hips to the lean lines of his abdomen. That way, whether you or this venerable one, Tishanjun rasped as he dragged his fingers over him, wouldn't we have come to care for each other, at least for the sake of our children, instead of ending up like this? His eyes slid over Chuaning's sweat-sheened forehead and tightly knit brows, down to his high-bridged nose and those lips pressed stubbornly shut. His eyes darkened. What a pity. It's no more than a daydream, after all. He removed his fingers, sticky with viscous ointment. Under the combined assault of both the pill and the cream, not even the purest saint could hold out for long. He knew precisely where Chuaning's limits lay, and merrily trampled them underfoot. Chuaning could feel something leaking where he'd been fingered open. Tishanjun moved with a dogged single-mindedness. No one could have guessed that, at this moment, the emperor who'd had his fill of all the world's sundry pleasures felt like a virgin sinking his teeth into his first taste of forbidden fruit. He wanted to glut himself on the man in his lap, and irrationally feared that if he delayed for even a second, the warmth in his arms would vanish. He was terrified. He was terrified of Chuaning disappearing, so he spared no thought for anything else. He took himself in hand, painfully hard, and lined himself up with that dripping entrance, The massive head of him breached that tight heat slowly, but once past the initial resistance, he drove himself in with one powerful thrust. Chu Wanning had held himself tensed against the intrusion, but the instant that hot, hard length was fully seated in him, he went limp with a ragged moan. Little huffs left him as he sagged against Tae-Shun-jun's chest, his sweat-damp back gleaming in the low light. I'm pretty sure I floated this possibility, but I don't remember when. That, if Meat Bun really wanted to be Meat Bun about it, she would have this be the first. Tae-Shun-jun closed his eyes in rapture. The intoxicating pleasure of burying himself in this man swept over him like a tide. In that moment, he'd never endured death or loneliness. All the suffering he'd undergone was written off in a single stroke. His Shizun, his consort Chu, his Wanning, all belonged to him again. He was fucking him. He was taking him. He was inside him, owning him, humiliating him, cherishing him. He could feel Chu Wanning tied around his cock, sucking him in. Chu Wanning's body loved him, craved him. Shizun, you're still so tight. Chu Wanning squeezed his eyes shut, but he couldn't help the fine shivers that racked him. His body had been set alight, his skin flushed red like he was drunk. He was humiliated and grieving, but the drug had pushed all these emotions far away, while the thrill of Mo-Run filling him was spreading like ink on paper, trickling into his limbs. Tae-Shun-jun fisted a hand in Chu Wanning's hair and wrenched back, baring his neck to bite his earlobe. He wrapped his arms more tightly around him. The shift drove him deeper inside Chu Wanning, who drew his brows together, pain spasming across his face as he gasped for air. Does it hurt? Tae-Shun-jun was attentive to every reaction. Bear with it for now, he rasped. It'll be better once I fucked you loose. Shizun, I'll make you remember how good you feel when you're with me. Maybe the drug had rendered him delirious, or maybe it was because Tae-Shun-jun had slipped and used a simple me instead of this venerable one. Oh my god, did he? I don't know. Listen, I'm on the floor. I'm melted on the floor. And if I stop for too long, I'm going to be too emotional to keep reading because my throat closes when that happens. So, yeah, I think there's the, yeah, no, he's right, sure. Regardless, a ripple went through Chu Wanning's glassy gaze. Those eyes that stayed sharp and cold nearly half his life were somehow, in this moment, gentle. The sight struck the Emperor, already far beyond hunger, somewhere deep inside. Holding him in his arms, Tae-Shun-jun began to thrust roughly up into him as he sat on that great bed haphazardly strewn with animal pelts. At first, Chu Wanning bit his lip and refused to yield, but as Tae-Shun-jun moved faster and harder as he heard the sound of Tae-Shun-jun's ragged breathing, his control began to fray. Small, broken whimpers escaped his lips. They were soft and hoarse, but to Tae-Shun-jun they were as potent as the most seductive moans. He ground himself deeper inside Chu Wanning. Louder. Don't hold back. It's not as if you never moaned for me in the past life. Beg me to fuck you, beg me to mount you, wrap your legs around my waist. That's it. I'll come inside you. I'll give you everything. Chu Wanning's cheeks were red as blood as Tae-Shun-jun poured an endless stream of filth into his ear, calling up those past events as if showing off heirloom treasures. His hips kept up a steady rhythm as he babbled. Tae-Shun-jun read it into him with the brutality of obsession. After a few more frantic strokes, he lay back on the bed and dragged Chu Wanning down, settling him over his chest before catching Chu Wanning's lips in a fervent kiss. He canted his hips, sinking his cock to its full depth. The new angle caught at that nerve deep inside Chu Wanning. Tae-Shun-jun felt the man in his arms go slack as the stickier wetness dripped from his hole. Tae-Shun-jun chuckled. Feel good, he said, self-satisfied. Isn't your lord husband the best? He didn't expect Chu Wanning to answer. In fact, he knew Chu Wanning wouldn't be able to. The Emperor was pathetically smug. This venerable one knows just where you like it, he breathed. You get wet like nothing else when I take you in this position. Shameless, aren't you? As if to punctuate his words, he thrust harder against the place that made Chu Wanning shake. Reluctant to leave that clinging warmth, he buried himself inside and stayed, rolling his hips in short, aborted jerks. This was where Chu Wanning was the most sensitive. inflamed by the drug and handled so roughly. All he was conscious of was that thick cockhead hammering the spot that made his skin prickle all over. Chu Wanning couldn't think, his eyes wide and empty as the cries were torn from his throat. Taking those moans for the highest form of acknowledgement, Taishan Jun wrapped his hands around Chu Wanning's sturdy waist and thrust up into him, fierce and fast, sharp and thorough. Louder, Shizin. Chu Wanning refused, clamping his lips shut, but Taishan Jun was hitting him right where he was most vulnerable, where he was slippery slick from the ointment and more. Chu Wanning could only endure so much. His lips fell open like a dying beast's, crying out in deepest despair. How is it? Is this disciple fucking you well? You're so tight, Shizin. Is this how you take your disciple's cock? Chu Wanning was overwhelmed and overstimulated, more so than he'd ever been in the past life. He couldn't hear what Taishan Jun was saying. His red-rimmed eyes were unfocused as he sprawled helplessly over Taishan Jun's sturdy chest, held down and fucked into delirium. The ointment had churned into white foam, oozing out in a puddle of slick wetness, forced out where their bodies joined. The juncture of Chu Wanning's thighs were soaking wet, but it wasn't enough for Taishan Jun. His eyes so black they gleamed purple were misted over by desire, filled to the brim with lust. His gaze was pinned on his Shizin's flushed face, hot with agony and pleasure, as his hips snapped upward with all the strength he possessed. He took hold of Chu Wanning's hand and brought it to his abdomen, pounding into him in sharp jolts. Look how deep I am, he panted. Feel that, Shizin. I'm all the way in. His huge cock split Chu Wanning open with every thrust, breaching him relentlessly with no sign of softening. Chu Wanning was nearing a breakdown. Amidst those humiliating sounds of flesh striking flesh, he gasped, Mo-run. 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 Years swept past his eyes, scenes of the boy growing into the man across 2 lifetimes. Chu Wanning's mind had unraveled. The consuming ecstasy, the intensity of sensation, confused him. He didn't know which world was real, which lifetime had passed. In the clash of bitter pain and sweetest pleasure, everything broke apart. His world shattered and fell like a flurry of snow, each flake a reflection of Mo-run, laughing, crying, kind, crazed. He saw Taishan Jun and Mo Zongxia's silhouettes merge into one, holding an oil paper umbrella, waiting quietly for him at the edge of the blizzard. Those purple-black eyes might have been good or evil. The snow fell harder, obscuring both the Emperor and the Zongxia, leaving only the slight figure of Mo-run at the very beginning. In his youth, standing in the swirling storm. Beneath the umbrella, the boy looked up at him, and his smile was filled with sorrow. Shinjin, I'm about to leave. Pay attention to me, won't you? For the very last time, pay attention to me, won't you? After this battle, perhaps neither version of me will ever see you again. Pay attention to me, please. When we first became teacher and disciple, I begged you for ages, but you ignored me. Now that we're at the end of everything, now that I only have this broken body to entwine with yours, will you overlook my insanity and ignorance? Pay attention to me, won't you? Mo-run. Caught in the vision, Chu Wanning's heart wrung tight. By the time he'd returned to his senses, he'd wrapped his arms around Taishan Jun. Mo-run, he sobbed. Taishan Jun started. Of course he started. Chu Wanning had never, even in those few instances where they'd been almost loving, held him of his own volition. He sat momentarily dazed, then swore and flipped them over, shoving Chu Wanning down on the bed as he lifted his legs and slotted himself between them to fuck him from above. Chu Wanning's sword-like brows drew together. The flickering reflections in his eyes could have been the drapes around the bed at Wushan Palace or the shadows in the inn at Wuchong Town. The inn had been the first time he'd ever slept with his own world's Mo-run. It hadn't been very long ago at all, but now it seemed a century away. His head was thrown back. He gasped for air, as if indulging in this moment of stolen pleasure. The sound was heartrending. It was soft as a sigh, but it brought Taishan Jun's blood to a boil. His hips moved faster, his eyes filled with Chu Waning's reflection. Waning. Waning. Sweat ran down their bodies as if to glue their flesh together. They wrapped seamlessly around each other on the bed they'd shared countless times in the past life. Tish and June arranged them into all sorts of positions, as if making up for every night he'd missed in these years alone. He laid Chu Waning on his stomach and drove into him from behind, then set Chu Waning in his lap while he thrust upward into that welcoming heat. At one point, he scooped him off the bed and fucked him mercilessly against the wall. This was his, Consort Chu. He could have him however he liked, take him wherever he wanted. He would caress him, cherish him, torment him, and possess him in every way. He would make Chu Waning his in every lifetime. No one could take him or steal him away, not even himself. As the night wore on, he pushed Chu Waning down on the bed and wedged a cushion beneath his sore hips. He was driven by primal instinct. He wanted to breed his mate like any hot-blooded male, even if he knew it was impossible. He raised Chu Waning's hips and held him there, kissing him hungrily as he rocked into him. Baby, it feels so good inside you, Taishanjun groaned, his pleasure building. His thrusts came faster and faster, his breathing more and more erratic. He lifted Chu Waning's hips higher. Chu Waning was at his limit. His calloused hands fisted tight in the sheets. Those slender wrists were trembling. Slow down. Taishanjun was thrusting so wildly his cock slipped out. The sudden emptiness made Chu Waning's unfocused eyes widen. He sucked in a ragged gasp, but it was barely a moment before Taishanjun lined up his thick cock, slapping that round cockhead wetly against his pert ass before slamming himself back in with even more force than before. I'm close. Taishanjun grabbed Chu Waning's limp waist, pounding into him with quick snaps. He dropped a kiss on Chu Waning's sweat-damp brow, the jet of his throat rolling as he gasped. Baby, lift your hips a little higher. Let me come inside you. Taishanjun's brows knit in pleasure as Chu Waning clenched around him, punching the breath from his lungs. He pushed them both deep into the bed and redoubled his efforts, while Chu Waning's legs dangled around his waist, toes curled and trembling. I'm coming, Waning. Taishanjun stared down at Chu Waning, taking in his flushed cheeks through crazed and infatuated eyes. With his last few dozen thrusts, each of them loud and messy, Taishanjun pressed himself hard against that bundle of nerves in Chu Waning and came inside him with a moan, releasing himself right where Chu Waning was most sensitive. The two of them, wrapped around each other, cried out at the same time. They'd come at the same moment, but Chu Waning didn't have Taishanjun's unnatural stamina and had already been pushed to climax twice. He had little left to spill, while Taishanjun's cum was thick and copious. He lifted Chu Waning's long legs to make him take in all his spend, and Chu Waning's low and raspy voice changed pitch at the sensation. A long moment elapsed before Taishanjun let Chu Waning's legs fall and collapsed on top of him. He could feel Chu Waning trying to move, wanting to shift the cushion out from beneath him. He reached out and grabbed Chu Waning's wrist to stop him. Taishanjun stared into Chu Waning's face, slack with the aftermath of his climax, a strange light flashing in his purplish black eyes. The enemy he could never defeat. The Shizun he could never desecrate. The immortal everyone considered pristine. The man he yearned for but could never have. Had been used so well his legs splayed open. He was pumped full of his cum, his leanly muscled thighs unable to close around him. The feeling of conquering the powerful was impossibly sweet. Taishanjun could feel himself hardening again, primed and ready to continue. Knowing that this feeding all directly back to Huabinan, like every thought, every impulse, all of that. I'm still clenched. I'm still not. Chu Waning was his addiction. The moment those stubborn, glimmering eyes, teary yet forever unyielding, so much as flicked him a glance, a wildfire would blaze to life in his mind and burn all the way down to his belly. I know, we wonder why that is. He grabbed Chu Waning's hand and dropped a kiss on his knuckles. Don't move, he said softly. Stay just like this. Taishan hadn't pulled out. He shifted inside Chu Wanning, feeling the slick heat of him, thick fluid leaking from where their bodies interlocked. Taishan swallowed in satisfaction, claiming Chu Wanning's mouth again. He kissed him, insatiable, as he mumbled, "Feel that? It's all plugged up inside. You better not lose a single drop. In a minute, this venerable one will keep going." Taishan hadn't lied. That night he took Chu Wanning again and again. By the end, half the furs on the bed had slipped off, and the pungent mess of their spend joined the musk coming from the pelts. In the early hours of the morning, Taishan spilled inside Chu Wanning for the very last time. He caressed Chu Wanning's sticky abdomen and kissed his slackened face. His Shizin, his consort Chu, the most honorable immortal in the eyes of the world, had been fucked until he was shattered. His bare skin, pink with arousal, glistened as if soaked in the finest pear blossom white. Those sharp phoenix eyes were wide and glassy, his breath coming in shallow pants. The flush had reached the corners of his eyes, while his soft lips were slightly parted, quivering with each inhale. Taishan stared at that slick and trembling mouth and was suddenly reminded of how these lips, which had never shown him the slightest weakness, had willingly wrapped themselves around Mo Zongshou's cock. Flames scorched his heart. Despite how many rounds he'd gone, he furiously shoved himself back into Chu Wanning's spasming body. Chu Wanning had been brought to climax too many times. He was barely conscious. He frowned and gasped purely out of instinct. "Enough of that. You're still so tight inside," Taishan chuckled. "This venerable one really is the best, right? I'm beautiful, right? I'm perfect and flawless, right?" As Hua Binan held himself open for... Who was that? Lu? Held open his robes. "I'm more beautiful than he is, right?" The question went unanswered, but it didn't matter. Chu Wanning's body was honest, if nothing else. He'd fucked Chu Wanning senseless. He'd drawn every bit of sensitivity out of that formidable body, and now the afterglow of orgasm turned that sensitivity into a lash that humiliated Chu Wanning further. Every jerk of Taishan hips made Chu Wanning's brows knit against his will, made him tremble and shake. Deep in thought, Taishan reached out to touch Chu Wanning's face. Chu Wanning shrank back reflexively, but Taishan grabbed his jaw and caressed his cheek. That elegant face was hot to the touch, the soft skin damp and salty with tears. Witnessing the aftermath of such intense pleasure seemed to confirm something for Taishan. He sighed and murmured, "Wanning, you finally returned. You'll never leave me again." Reflected in his purple-black eyes was a face in which strength and vulnerability mingled. Taishan stared for a long while, then bent to press a kiss to Chu Wanning's temple. He let out a breath of complete satisfaction. Sleep. Taishan tugged at the mess of blankets until they were both covered. The night quieted around them. Taishan sank into sleep holding Chu Wanning, a mirror of those final hours on Nanping Mountain, Mo Zongshou's last snowy night. He, too, had clutched Chu Wanning in his arms until the candles went out and dawn broke. The two of them were the same. In the wake of that tide of desire, Chu Wanning lay like a splayed doll, every inch of him sticky with sweat and their commingled fluids. He couldn't speak or move. He drifted, unmoored from his body for a very long time, until his senses came filtering back. He heard the pouring rain outside the window and felt Taishan slow breathing and the weight of his embrace. Chu Wanning glanced over with effort, then turned his head and gazed into Taishan sleeping face. For a flash, terror gripped Chu Wanning. He didn't know when he was. The man beside him was so cold he feared he, too, would slowly stop breathing, just like that young man in that snowy night on Nanping Mountain, that his heartbeat would slow and fade. He realized he was shaking. But why? Taishan was a shell. He was a walking corpse. But then why was he just like Chu Wanning remembered? Why did he feel and act in precisely the same way? Taishan would give him no answer. Perhaps even he himself didn't know. His panic slowly retreated, and his eyes gained focus. Chu Wanning fought for composure, and in the depths of his pain and despair managed to calm his surging heart. The air in Wushan Palace was thick with the smell of sex. I was right. This was Wushan Palace, not Nanping Mountain. And the man holding him wasn't Mo Zhongshe, but Taishanjin, the lover, disciple, and husband who died long ago, a walking puppet of dead flesh. Chu Wanning swallowed the bitterness in the back of his throat and shoved down, excised, and suffocated all he felt. Facing the annihilation of two worlds in this most final endgame, the two lay in each other's arms. The room gradually stilled. Everything returned to peace. Their last entanglement was given over to the night. That's a scene break. We're taking a moment to breathe. The hours passed. A gap in the heavy drapes around the bed revealed a mess of blankets within, cast in flickering light by the flames beyond the window. The storm never stopped. It only raged harder. Chu Wanning opened his eyes in the dark. The man beside him was still asleep. Perhaps it had become habit after years of companionship, or perhaps Taishanjin simply felt secure after force-feeding him that drug. Regardless, he slept deeply and without weariness. His strong and well-sculpted body was still half on top of Chu Wanning, so heavy he could hardly breathe. He turned to look at Taishanjin's face. They had met when the space-time gate had first been torn open at Mount Jiao, and he remembered the cold stillness of his chest then. Yet now, he heard a steady rhythm from within the man beside him. The spiritual core gouged out of Mo Zhongshe's chest had reformed in Taishanjin's as something like a heart. He aborted that line of thought. Mo Run was dead. In this world and the other one, he was dead and gone. Accompanied by the slow thudding of that heart, he told himself, Mo Run is dead. This is just a corpse without its souls. You know what to do. He hardened his heart. Light gathered in his palms, but it sputtered, unsteady, and finally winked out. Chu Wanning stared silently at the man next to him. In the gloom, with Taishanjin's eyes closed, the lines between lifetimes blurred once again. It suddenly felt so much like that rainy night when they'd shared a bed at Wuchang Town. That night, Chu Wanning had woken in the dark and leaned over to kiss Mo Run's sleeping face. No. Mo Run was dead. Even if this man had a heartbeat, he was a corpse. Even if he could speak, he'd lost his souls. He was dead. But then, how could he remember things that had happened after his rebirth? Why would the emotions in his eyes be so full and earnest? Why would... Chu Wanning shuddered, refusing to complete the thought. He gritted his teeth. Light again flashed as Wai Sha answered his summons. It appeared in his hands as a golden short sword, dazzlingly bright. Without another moment of hesitation, he whirled, eyes shut as he brought the blade down on Taishanjin's chest with all his strength. There was a ripping sound as it sank hilt deep. Chu Wanning's eyes flew open. He was alone in bed. Wai Sha was buried in the mattress. That breathlessly sharp holy weapon had not found a home in the revenant emperor. Rain poured down in torrents. One of the eastern windows had been allowed to fall into disrepair. The wind slammed it open, and the downpour howled into the room with a gust of frigid air. A bolt of white lightning tore through the darkness of the room, its icy light illuminating a terrifying face by the bed. And this venerable one was so sure you wouldn't strike. Chu Wanning slowly turned. The thought that Chuaning was prepared for this possibility, and in fact, possibly was like, if this were to happen, I will then have to take the chance, take my shot in the moment of perceived uh, exposure afterwards to try and kill him. Chu Wanning slowly turned. Taishanjun stood, leaning against the bedpost. A faint scratch crossed his bare chest where he'd slipped out from under the blade. He paid it no heed, eyes fixed coolly on Chu Wanning. To think you would still try to kill me. He swooped down with an awful swiftness and caught Chu Wanning's wrist. There was a crisp crack as he dislocated Chu Wanning's arm. Are you surprised? I'm much stronger than I used to be. Taishanjun searched Chu Wanning's face, pale with pain yet refusing to speak. You haven't seen me use these skills before, have you? He asked mildly, then paused. To be honest, there's nothing surprising about it. If you were the one who lived here alone, he said, hollow-voiced. If you didn't trust anyone, and could never drop your guard, the only thing of interest left to you would be training too. After 8 years of this, you too would improve immeasurably. The glow of Huaisha disappeared, its shattered shadow returning to Chu Wanning. Taishanjun smiled, very faintly. Shizun, once I learned all my attacks from you. Not anymore. Chu Wanning said nothing. The years he spent reborn, I've spent slaving away, and now I've acquired his spiritual core. He ran a calloused fingertip between Chu Wanning's brows. Someone of Shizun's caliber couldn't hope to kill me. At this point, he seemed to remember something. Shizun doesn't know what I've been doing all these years in this ruin of a world, do you? He spoke sweetly, never once referring to himself as this venerable one. I'll show you now. I keep missing that. I keep missing when he doesn't use this venerable one. It just keeps flying right past me. I mean, some other stuff is kind of going on at the moment, so it's really not surprising, but it just keeps flying right by me. It wasn't far, the back mountain of Xisheng Peak, where the barrier to the ghost realm was at its thinnest. Taishanjun's clothes had been entirely soaked in their earlier battle, and he'd later torn Chu Wanning's robes to unwearable rags. But Taishanjun didn't mind. With a flourish of his long fingers, he sent off a spirit butterfly. Lu Gong came in with freshly laundered robes moments later. Through the drapes, Chu Wanning glimpsed the face of that old servant he hadn't seen in many years and didn't know how to feel. Your Majesty, the clothes you asked for. You're the only one who'd know where these old robes were stored. You brought them so quickly. Taishanjun's voice was almost devoid of inflection. Leave them here. You may go. Knowing Chu Wanning was behind the drapes, the old man's hands trembled slightly. He badly wanted to steal a glimpse of the man he'd once served, but etiquette forbade it. He kept his head low and kowtowed before staggering off. The clothes fit him perfectly. Of course they did. They'd belonged to Chu Wanning in the past life. Mo Run sat nearby, his long legs crossed as he watched Chu Wanning dress silently through the drapes. There was a haziness to his gaze. No one could have guessed what he was thinking, just as no one understood why Emperor Taishanjun, who hated Chu Zongshi so very, very much, had refused to burn his clothes even years after his death. What use was there for clothes no one would ever wear again? The tempest screamed overhead, black clouds rolling across the horizon. All manner of ominous signs had appeared, but Taishanjun merely called up a rain barrier and enclosed himself in Chu Wanning. The dark and terrible storm accompanied their passage through the courtyards and pavilions, reducing the scenery and faces of the servants to an indiscernible blur. Your Majesty, Zongshi. Greetings to your Majesty, Zongshi. Once past Three Lives Hall and on Naiha Bridge, the sinister red glow from the back mountain became visible. Taishan had taken the lead, and now he turned back to glance at Chu Waning. Something like mirth tugging at his lips. Xisheng Peak stands where yin and yang overlap. The barrier is more vulnerable here than anywhere else. You used to come here often to repair it. I wonder if you ever sensed anything other than ghost energy. Chu Waning said nothing, but his hands had tightened into fists within his sleeves. He had more or less guessed what he would see. Shiming Jing had torn open the space-time gate of life and death, wielded the Zhenlong chess formation, and conquered 2 worlds. His ultimate goal was certainly nothing simple. Even so, he remained silent. When you came to this world, you must have passed by many cities and villages. Taishan slowed his pace to walk beside him, his tone so casual he might have been talking about the weather. Didn't you notice the towns and cities were awfully quiet? The pair strode along the narrow paths of the mountain, brushing aside the overgrown veils of flowering vines. Around the next turn lay the back mountain cliffs. Taishan suddenly pulled to a halt. The stone wall behind him seemed to blaze with a furious flame, dyeing the mountainside red. He turned to face Chu Waning, the ghoulish crimson glow lighting his eyes as he bared his teeth in a brilliant, bloody grin. All these years of this venerable one's hard work have culminated in this. Shizhen, please take a look. I can't finish the final season of Stranger Things, a show that I have been adoring and following for the better part of a decade until I come back from the break. I can't finish the end of season 1 of Heated Rivalry until I come back from the break. I can't watch Ten Dance, which is, I believe Japanese, ballroom dancing, canonically queer film that is a niche that I've been wanting to see explored for probably the better part of 2 decades. I can't watch any of that until I get back from break. And that is literally how this bitch ends Volume 9. That's it. That's it. It's the end of the book. It's fucking it. That's it. That's it. We don't come back until the end of February, by the way. Like the very end of February. There's not even reading streams of something else between here and then, because my January's, even without the reading streams, my January is very full of getting caught up on things like Stranger Things and Heated Rivalry and Ten Dance. So, and Has Been Hotel. Yeah. Yep. Won't even have another reading stream to distract me. Sure. Why not? This may as well happen. I've been pulling 13-hour days for the past few weeks. This may as well happen. So, that's volume 9 of Erha. Did I mention that the channel hit 15,000 subscribers today, or did I say that in the book chat? I don't know. I have no idea what time is anymore. But just in case I hadn't, we hit 15K. We hit 15K. So, at the very least, you know, I get to run off into the sunset with that. It's also my anniversary this week. On the 18th. It just so happens to be the day that 10 Dance drops. Yeah. 5 years. The wife and I have been married 5 years on Thursday. We actually get to go on a little mini vacation. We're going to go to the Atlanta Aquarium. Apparently, it's one of like the 10 best aquariums in the country. I don't know. But that's where we're going. So I've got plenty of things to do and rest to be had. And then an admin week so that I can get a whole bunch of stuff tied up before we head into Gaywatch 2026. All that coming up. It's going to be so much fun. If I keep talking, I won't scream in unbridled rage. So, here we are. The book chat for what we read today will also be in late February since they only happen just before a reading stream. So, I don't even get to vent about this, at least out loud, until late February. I might allow myself a little bit of an indulgence and head into the public Gaywatch Discord. There's a link in the description to, I don't know, post a lot of really angry GIFs, something. At least key smash really hard, you know. So we're already late by like half an hour. And even though I started working at 9 a.m. This morning, I need to go pick up my ADHD meds, come back, and then keep working until probably about 10 p.m. So, yeah. I'm so furious at her that I can't even talk about it. So angry. Flames on the side of my face. Just breathing, heaving, seething breath. Flames. I'm incandescent with fury. But thank you for being here. This is one fuck of a final stream of the year. But thank you for being here. Thank you for listening this far. I know there's actually quite a few of you who have been here from the beginning, which is wild because it's been like a year and a half of Erha. So, in the meantime, in the meantime, please, dear God, take care of yourselves and have a lovely holiday and a great new year. New Year is the best holiday. Cynical people write it off, but don't do that. Give yourself the benefit of starting a new year afresh. Your psyche really needs it. I was going to say something else right here. What fucking was it? Oh, since you're Erha fans, if you need something to gnaw on from here to late February when we pick up volume 10, there are streams for Captive Prince. I've already read it, the whole trilogy, and the bonus side stories and everything. It's already over there. And if you're a fan of Erha, you should be a fan of Captive Prince. Erha is obviously way on the more extreme end, but Captive Prince is still your thing. Do me a favor. Go give Captive Prince a shot if you haven't yet, or rewatch it. All right. I'm appreciating all of the rainbows in chat actually right now. That's very healing to the soul. Thank you, Liv and Maddie, once again for gifting a bunch of subs. That's deeply, deeply helpful and really nice. That's just very nice. That's really kind. I'm going to go utterly collapse for about 5 minutes and then get back to work. I love you all very, very, very fucking much. These streams are deeply goddamn important to me. I hope you have a lovely rest of the year. I will see you in 2026 for volume 10 of this fucking series. Take care of yourselves.